Hello and welcome to How to Fix It. Last year we looked at AfterMASH, which was the sequel/spinoff to the hit television series MASH. In that video I mainly looked at the pilot and then talked briefly about the rest of the show. But at the time there had only been 3 episodes, including the pilot, online for me to watch. And they weren't the best representation of the show. But since then I've found nearly the entire series online, and I was able to watch the entire series. And so, my opinion on AfterMASH has changed, because I saw things that I had only read about online while I was writing that review. As such, I'm writing this video assuming that you've seen that last video, which I will link to you. If you haven't seen it, go watch it, or you'll be really confused about some of the stuff I say, unless, of course, you've actually seen AfterMASH. Anyway, on to the show. AfterMASH was a show made to cash in on the MASH mania that had occurred during the parent show's run. Most of the cast was pretty content with leaving the show at 11 seasons, but 3 actors agreed to sign on to the spin-off. Harry Morgan, who played Colonel Potter, Jamie Farr, who played Corporal Klinger, and William Christopher, who played Father Mulcahy. And so AfterMASH was born. The show takes place at General Pershing Veterans Hospital, called General by the staff and patients. Colonel Potter gets a job as the chief of staff and brings on Klinger as his clerk and Father Mulcahy as the hospital chaplain, as they both had fallen on hard times after the war, with Klinger getting arrested and Father Mulcahy becoming an alcoholic after he loses his hearing to the tinnitus he got after a bomb went off near him in the finale of MASH, Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen. Klinger brings with him his wife Soon Lee, played by future DS9 star Rosalind Chow, who he married in the finale of MASH. The series also featured Colonel Potter's often-mentioned wife Mildred, played by Barbara Townsend in Season 1, and Anne Petoniak in Season 2. Potter often butts heads with the hospital's bureaucratic administrator, Mike D'Angelo, played by John Chappelle, and Klinger butts heads with D'Angelo's secretary, Alma Cox, played by Brandis Kemp. Also on staff at the hospital are Dr. Gene Pfeiffer, played by J.O. Sanders, a young resident eager to do any sort of medical procedure, who was replaced partway through the first season by Dr. Mark Boyer, played by David Aykroyd, a Korean War veteran who lost his leg and is very caustic and bitter to everyone around him. During the second season premiere, D'Angelo is replaced by Wally Wainwright, played by Peter Michael Getz, a smarmy administrator sent in by the government to fix all the problems that the hospital had when D'Angelo ran the place. Now this show did something that the original show couldn't, namely story arcs. MASH never really did story arcs, and just had problems that persisted over various episodes, some only cropping up ever so often, like Father Mulcahy's quest to get a promotion, or Winchester's attempts to get transferred back to Tokyo. The only real story arcs in MASH were Margaret's engagement, subsequent marriage and divorce from Lieutenant Colonel Donald Penobscot, and Klinger's attempts at getting a Section 8. The first season of AfterMASH saw Soon Lee getting pregnant, and over the course of the rest of the season, we see Klinger working multiple jobs to support his growing family, and Alma Cox's attempts to get Klinger fired because she doesn't like him and how he does things. Dr. Boyer himself is a story arc as he constantly gets into fights with people who don't think a guy with one leg can perform surgery. The second season saw story arcs like the hospital trying to adjust to Wainwright, Potter trying to adjust to the fact that his new clerk is Alma Cox, and Klinger running afoul of the police after he attacks a shady real estate broker that scammed him out of all his savings and subsequently breaks out of prison to see the birth of his son. Once he's caught, he ends up attempting to convince the psychiatrist that he's crazy, hearkening back to the Section 8 stuff from MASH. The show featured references to the parent show, like having Mulcahy mention Hawkeye in the pilot, Potter mentioning Frank Burns twice, referring to his poor surgical skills, and Potter also mentioning Major Sidney Friedman once. Not to mention that in the episode Chief of Staff, Mildred, Klinger, Soon Lee, and Father Mulcahy surprised Colonel Potter by decorating his office with all the stuff from his office at the 4077, featuring a painting of the main MASH cast. 2 characters aside from the main 3 appear, including Radar O'Reilly, who gets married, but we all saw how that turned out in my review of Walter, and in Klinger's subsequent trial following his arrest after escaping prison, they call in Colonel Flagg, a recurring character from MASH who was a crazy CID agent to testify against him. Sadly, we never got any resolution to the series. It was cancelled during the second season, and its final episode was never filmed, and the last one filmed was never aired in America, and so I've never seen it. The show was surprisingly good. I know in my initial review I said that it wasn't good because of the fact that it wasn't enough like MASH, but I was wrong. The show isn't like MASH, and that's not a bad thing. The show's first season is very strong, featuring compelling story and great characters. While I wasn't too happy with the replacing of Dr. Pfeiffer with Dr. Boyer, I have to concede that Dr. Boyer is a much stronger character. Dr. Pfeiffer was pretty one-note. He was a young resident who wanted to perform any surgery he could sink his scalpel into, and he liked to eat. That was it. Dr. Boyer, on the other hand, was a guy who worked at an aid station in the Korean War and lost his leg, and so has a chip on his shoulder to not only just able-bodied people, but to Colonel Potter specifically, because since he worked at a MASH, Colonel Potter was protected from the type of shelling and attack that cost Boyer his leg. Boyer was a jerk, but he wasn't a bad guy, actually offering Klinger a place to stay when he was on the run from the law. He did kick Klinger out, though, but only because Klinger initially refused and then showed up while Boyer was in bed with a woman. D'Angelo was also a jerk, but he wasn't a bad guy either. He was just an incompetent put in a position of power and made the figurehead by a bureaucratic organization, namely the U.S. government. Arguably, he was very similar to Colonel Blake in that respect, but lacked Blake's compassion and understanding. Alma Cox was insufferable, but then again, that's kinda how they wrote her. Her character was deliberately insufferable. However, I have nothing positive to say about Wainwright. I didn't like him at all, and he wasn't in the show for as long as everyone else, so I didn't have time to form a more complete opinion. This show is basically what you get when you take a Lego set and put all the minifigures together correctly, but then made something different out of all of the bricks than what was on the box. All the pieces were there, but it made something that wasn't as good as the original, but still a pretty awesome set. We'll be right... Choppers, we'll be right back. Attention all personnel. We're back. The biggest issue of the show was that in the second season, they tried to make the show more like MASH without all the things that made MASH a good show. In fact, they were so sure the show would do well that the network made ads that played up the idea that AfterMASH would beat the A-Team in the ratings. Obviously, they were wrong. The things they tried to get from MASH were the maudlin personality that Dr. Boyer brought that was reminiscent of Hawkeye, and putting Klinger back in drag for a few episodes, and then back to trying to convince people that he was crazy. While Boyer was a really good addition, the Klinger stuff that worked in MASH failed without the writing staff of MASH. Overall, the show was mostly good, but they tried to keep all the stuff from MASH without changing it to fit the new format. I love MASH. But I also like AfterMASH, and the first season seemed really promising. It was the network's quest to make it so much like the parent show for the sake of ratings, that the ratings ended up dropping, which caused the cancellation. That just goes to show, don't go up against Mr. T, because he'll pity the fool, and also beat them in the ratings. Simply, let it be its own show. It had so much potential that was dashed by a greedy network that didn't know that the reason that MASH succeeded was because it was so different from anything else that was on the air at the time. Look at Trapper John MD. It's a straight medical drama and a MASH spin-off. But it didn't try to be like MASH, and it did really well. While, yeah, it was mostly a legal thing that kept it separate from MASH, as it was legally considered a spin-off of the Robert Altman film, it became a popular show because it embraced its parent show, but also did its own thing. If AfterMASH had taken that approach, maybe we'd have been able to see more of Potter, Klinger, and Mulcahy and their adventures at General. And that was AfterMASH. A pretty good show that was ruined, like many, by the network, and by virtue of trying too hard to be like a more popular show. Do I like it more than MASH? No. If I could only watch one MASH series for the rest of my life, it would be the original show. But that doesn't mean AfterMASH was bad. It's very misguided, and if they hadn't messed up the second season, I think it would have turned out to be almost as popular as MASH, because here's a fun tidbit for you. AfterMASH's first season finished 10th out of all network shows for the 1983 to 84 television season. And you know what MASH's first season finished at? 46! MASH didn't hit its stride until its second season. That, unlike AfterMASH's, didn't try to retool itself to be like the popular shows of the time. All in all, the show could have been great, but that chance was squandered by an impatient network. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of how to fix it, you can hit that subscribe button, and if you have any comments or complaints about the video, you can put those in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this video, share it to your friends and share it around the internet. And maybe consider supporting the show on Patreon. See you next time. So how goes the search? Well, I can't find the transporter coordinates that my double used after we fought him a few months ago, or the contents of that flash drive he took with him. Everything we left on the drive is intact, and he was smart. He didn't leave any trail behind on the hard drive. There's nothing of strategic value on this thing. So that's a bust then. And Iota's attempts to track his transporter signal failed too. So now we're back to where we were 2 years ago. Your evil double is on the run, and we have no idea where he is or what he's planning. I just got an idea. We know he didn't put something on the hard drive. But what if he took something off of it? I can't see why he'd do that. We haven't used the damn thing since October of 2013. And even then, the only things left on there were probably just a scan of my brain from that business with the adaptive virus he sent after me, and your formula for the antidote. Like you said before, there's nothing of strategic value on that thing. Whatever he's got, I just hope it's not anything like that virus. Rise.